Shalom. Hello. I'm going to speak in English. Hopefully that's okay. My Hebrew is really bad, so if I tried to speak in Hebrew, I think I would embarrass myself. My name is Yj Fischer. I'm the Vice President of Government Partnerships at Bird. And being in Tel Aviv is a very exciting thing in the sense that this is a city where shared scooter mobility has really taken off. And I think there are a lot of issues, like there are some very good things about it, some things that people are concerned about and talking about, and I want to get into all of that today. So to start, maybe I'll just tell you something that most of you already know, which is about the traffic problem that we have globally around the world. I feel like this is something we don't need to spend a lot of time on. In Tel Aviv, you know this better than anyone else. What is amazing to me is there was an article, I think the other day, about how Tel Aviv is the second most congested city in the Western world. That's really quite incredible, although I think for anyone who's been in traffic here, that will not surprise you. I was sitting the other day in my hotel. By the way, you'll have to forgive me. I'm pregnant, so I get out of breath very quickly. So I might do a little bit of leaning and catching my breath. The other day, I was sitting at the Sheraton Hotel right on the beach and really noticed how you have the traffic congestion on the road right there, right by the water, but the bike lane was actually nearly empty. And this was morning rush hour. And we're going to talk about some of the great statistics in terms of how many people are using shared mobility in Tel Aviv, especially to get around during rush hour. I think it's something like 40% of Bird rides take place during rush hour. So people are using it for their commute to and from work. But I do think that even though there is a lot of discussion right now in Tel Aviv about how and where we should have scooters, I think when you look at the bike lanes and you look at the car traffic, you can really see that there is an enormous amount of potential to get more people out of cars and onto different forms of shared mobility, whether that's scooters or something else. So some of these other statistics, which are just crazy. I mean, when you look at the volume of what we're talking about in terms of car traffic and something that is only on the uptick in Tel Aviv. And my understanding is that in the city, there's talk about congestion pricing for next year. I mean, really something that you hear city officials grappling with is how do we deal with the problem of traffic and congestion, just in terms of quality of life, to say nothing of the health consequences when you have terrible pollution and congestion. So we are Bird. We launched about 1.5 years ago. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. When I talk to governments all over the world, and there's a lot of discussion about the scooter industry, and it's hard to believe that it's only 1.5 years old. So there's a lot we're learning in terms of how to be really good partners to cities, how to improve our operations in cities. But what is very clear is that we met a demand that was out there. Tel Aviv is one of the few cities in the world where people were already using scooters and other forms of micromobility before we came. I think we've been in Tel Aviv for about 8 to 10 months, and it's been an absolute wild ride in terms of taking off. We've replaced over 90,000 car trips. 1 in 3 people in Tel Aviv has used a Bird. It's really quite exceptional. We are now all over the world, which I will show you a picture of in a second. We just announced that we are going to be introducing a seated vehicle. Not everybody loves to stand, so we want to make sure that we have greater accessibility options. And this is something you'll be hearing us talk about more in Tel Aviv in the weeks to come. Like I mentioned, we're all over the world at this point. I will say, as we get into the rest of this presentation, one of the really interesting things is that every city is unique, absolutely. But some of the challenges we find in markets are the same all over the world. Different concerns that people have about safety, about parking, those kinds of things we hear all over the world. And so what I want to talk about today is some of the solutions that we are developing in response to some of the concerns that we're hearing. So I want to touch on 3 things: sustainability, safety, and then what Bird offers. And what Bird offers is some of those solutions that I was just mentioning. So sustainability. This is something that's really important to us because it's really hard to talk about taking cars off the road, being a greener solution, if we don't have vehicles that are durable, that are going to last, that are also providing a green, sustainable solution for cities. We really like the record that we're developing. Here are some of the stats. The bottom line is that we are introducing sort of a revolution in terms of how people are commuting in a green, sustainable way. We were one of the winners of the Global Sustainability Development Award. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong. One of the things that we're spending a lot of time on now is developing a vehicle miles traveled protocol so that to the extent that we have any kind of emissions that are being produced in the course of our operations, we're offsetting it with renewable credits and such. I'm going to gloss over sustainability unless people have questions and move on to safety. Safety is a really big issue for us. I think one of the things that I've seen increasingly in cities across the world is just a discussion about how do we make this product safer. When it comes to getting cars off the road, cars are responsible for something like 1.2 million deaths a year. We are absolutely a safer option. We went out and produced a study. I think we mostly limited it to looking at US markets, and we're going to be expanding it to look at international markets as well. But we produced the industry's first safety study to actually look at what the incident rate is. I know that I work in the scooter industry. I'm not sure how much time you spend paying attention to this, but you might hear about an incident. If somebody gets hit by a scooter, if there's ever a fatality, it's something that makes news, and one of the things we've seen is it reverberates. And so we wanted to dig into the data and figure out how big of a problem is this. And when we looked at the data, and this is something that we have published, and you can find on our website, what we discovered is we are safer than bicycles. So it is a mode of transportation that is proving to be incredibly safe. And the more rides we have, the more we find that that statistic holds true. That said, we should always try to improve and always try to be safer. And so part of what we do is really robust education, things that are on our scooter, on our app, on our website, on our social media account. And then we're also revamping our vehicles. And for us, it's really important to spend time constantly iterating to be sure that we're offering people the safest vehicle out there. So that's something that over the last several months, we've spent an enormous amount of time on and something that we're going to continue to do. And I think you'll hear some more news from us in the coming weeks about all of this. There are two parts of safety. To me, when I think about it, there are safe vehicles and then there are safe operations. What does safe operations mean? That means we spend a lot of energy trying to figure out how to prevent underage riders from using our vehicles. We think that you should have to be over 18, unless in some markets we offer a waiver for people who are 16 and 17. But we want to see a certain maturity level of people who are using scooters. Other things include the fact that you should never be riding on sidewalks, or things like you should be wearing a helmet, or things about whether riders are allowed to ride tandem, which is never allowed. So for us, these are really important in terms of ensuring safe operations, not just for riders, but also for the larger community. Because the truth is that if someone is riding recklessly on a scooter, that is going to impact pedestrians, that's going to impact people who are in cars. So for us, it's about addressing the problem in a broader way so that the community feels safer. So this is something we spend an enormous amount of time and energy on, and I'm going to get into some of the solutions that we've created. Insurance. So we spend, let me just talk about economic impact and then I'll come to insurance. One of the things that we actually are trying to do a better job of telling our story about is in terms of the economic impact that we provide for communities. So when it comes to communities, part of this is direct jobs, and then part of this is about growing the population that is actually visiting local businesses. One of the things that we're studying, and we're going to be putting out more data on, that we've started to see, is that people who get out of cars and use scooters actually patronize or visit local businesses at a much higher rate, leading to an uptick in terms of the kind of volume that local businesses are doing. On the question of insurance, we do several things. So we have a certain insurance liability policy that protects cities. That's really important to us. It's part of our partnership that we offer with cities. And then there's a certain amount of insurance that we expect from the rider in terms of what the rider is going to cover. So a lot of times it turns on what is the incident. But most cities have certain requirements around insurance globally around the world. And that is something that we offer in terms of making sure that if someone is going to, so sorry, I'm out of breath a little bit. If someone is going to be involved in an incident, that there is insurance that is provided by the company, but there should also be a certain amount of insurance that is on the rider to, as a way of incentivizing riders to engage in good behavior. So one of the things that we've spent time talking to researchers about and studying is what happens when you don't have any responsibility on the rider. And if you shift all that responsibility to the company. And what happens is we see that riders are a little less responsible in a way that concerns us. So that is something that we're thinking about. So I just want to talk very briefly, and then I'm going to get into some of the solutions that I keep referencing. Equity is one of the key pillars in terms of how we think about our operations in a city. And what that means is that we want to make sure that we are offering an affordable solution that everyone can use that can actually reduce people's car usage. So it has to be something that is cheap enough, that gets people out of cars, that allows for them to get around in a sustainable and affordable way. And so we have a whole life cycle in terms of how we service our scooters and how we operate in the city that enables us to accommodate all different kinds of populations across the socioeconomic spectrum. I think that that is a longer conversation. If anyone's interested in learning more about this, I'd be glad to talk to you about it afterwards. So now I want to talk about some of the solutions I keep referencing. What Bird offers. So one of the things that's really important to us is to be, I've sort of said this a few different times, but to be a really good partner to government. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you have a lot of different modes of transportation that have come into cities. And a lot of those modes of transportation have sort of felt like we are entitled to operate in a city, and so we're just going to go about doing our business, we're going to collect data, but we're not necessarily going to share that with cities. At Bird, we take a completely different approach. Our approach is we want to help cities think about how to grow responsibly, how to get more cars off the road. And so part of what we want to do is to provide cities with the data that we have so they can make better and smarter decisions about how they're building infrastructure, where they're putting in bike lanes, how they're thinking about how people move about the city. An example is Paris. In Paris, we provided the city with heat maps about where people are actually using scooters. And one of the things that we started to hear back were officials could not believe how many rides were starting and ending at metro stations. And they were looking at where people were going in terms of watching these clusters move from the metro stations. They were seeing, one, that we actually do provide a last mile solution, a first mile, last mile solution. And two, actually seeing which metro stations were being populated, which times of day, helping them get a much more coherent picture about movement in their city. So this is something in Paris we've had really wonderful results from in the sense of working with the city around this. In Los Angeles, we work with sort of one of the more cutting edge departments of transportation, really trying to think about how do you use and harness this data. And that's something that is a core principle for us. So we really believe we have to share this. That is part of our responsibility and part of giving back to the community in terms of if we're going to learn all of this information, city officials should know it. Okay, what we offer the community. So I started talking about parking, and some people call it clutter, which is when there are a lot of scooters on the road, right? And one of the things that we're starting to find is that people really are using scooters. it really is getting them out of cars. It is actually replacing car trips. And that is the positive side. But what does that mean? What that also means is you're seeing that scooters end up in all sorts of places. And a lot of times what we're hearing back from communities is a concern about, well, why aren't these neater? Why are these blocking the sidewalks? Why don't we have a better place for scooters to be parked? So this is something we've heard all over the world. And I would say it's the two biggest issues I hear from governments and from communities is around safety and around parking. So what we've done is we've come up with a whole range of solutions. It's something we're in the process of rolling out, so you'll hear us talking more about this. But we have something on the order of 8 different solutions that we are offering cities. And part of this is working with cities to better understand their needs, because the needs of a Tel Aviv are going to be different than the needs of a Santa Monica, than the needs of a Mexico City, than the needs of a Chicago. And so part of this is trying to understand how is it that communities would prefer to get around? Where are ideal places for scooters to be parked? What is the way that people are using them? What time of day are people using them? And how can we ensure that our fleet is kept in the most orderly manner? So let me give you an example when I talk about what are some kind of parking solutions. One of the things that we started doing, which was something we initially saw a while back in Singapore and we thought was great, was to put QR codes, so different codes on the infrastructure somewhere, and allow people to scan it, and they would have to scan it in order to end their ride. So what that was doing was already when you end your ride, you're required to take a photo to show that it is properly parked, but now we were introducing a layer that indicated you have to scan that QR code, so it has to be in the location where you're supposed to be parked. So that's one example of the kinds of things we're doing. Another example is we started moving gradually over to a system where we have individuals, humans, checking the parking pictures instead of relying on machine learning and algorithms. I think one of the most interesting things for me about being a bird is starting to realize that people look at us like a tech company. And so they always want to know, okay, we have a problem. What is the technology solution? And one of the things that I've seen by being a bird is that we are trying to deal with changing human behavior. And technology is not always the best way to try to change human behavior. Sometimes it's education, and sometimes you need people-to-people interaction. So things like not leaning on machine learning as the only way of checking whether people are properly parking their pictures, because there is a limit to how effective that is in the short term. And instead using an actual team at our headquarters that reviews pictures is a kind of very small tweak that we have found actually makes a difference in terms of how vehicles are parked. So we have a whole range of solutions. I would say in terms of what we spend most of our time working on as a company, parking and safety are the 2 biggest things. They're the most important things to us right now in terms of making sure that we can have sustainable, responsible growth in the city. The other thing that we did is we thought to ourselves, part of the problem is we're going to be a small team. No matter how big we grow a team, there will be more vehicles on the road. And in fact, one of the things that we hear a lot is that the community, we'll hear from community groups, that they have concerns about various things having to do with scooters, whether it's damaged, whether it's how they're parked, where they're located, etc. And we thought to ourselves, why don't we take advantage of the wisdom of the commons, take advantage of the fact that there are people in their community who are seeing these problems, and let them tell us what the problems are, so then we can go and fix them quickly. But so much better to take advantage of a multitude set of eyes as opposed to just our own. So what we did was we created something that I actually believe is the only one so far in the industry. It allows you to use our app, regardless of whether you are a bird rider or not. You don't have to enter any kind of credit card information or anything like that, and allows you to report an incident. And that report then comes to us, and then we can then go out and rectify that vehicle. And part of what that is designed to do is to say to the community, we want to hear your concerns, tell us what you're seeing, and then let us fix it. So I think that what I would say is I love the trend that this exemplifies, which is to say we're going to involve the entire community in helping us be a better company and a more responsible partner. And I think that this is the kind of solution that you're going to see us look to do more of over time. When I think about what our product team at headquarters spends a lot of time thinking about, is how do we take advantage of the community? If the community has concerns, how do we make sure that we're hearing them and not just hearing from our rider base? And then I want to talk about what we offer small businesses. This is something really new and really exciting that we're doing, but we are launching something called Bird Platform. And what that basically says is we have seen a lot of entrepreneurs across the world who want to launch their own scooter company. And for us, we have spent the last year and a half refining our safety operations, refining our vehicle safety, continuing to refine our parking solutions, and we want to help bring that to the rest of the industry. We want to make sure that as the scooter industry grows, people are being responsible partners for cities. And so part of what we offer small businesses is a way to actually launch a scooter business using our vehicles and using some of our best-in-class operations. So it's something really exciting, something we're working on. It's one of the smaller departments right now at our company, but I think over time is going to be a much larger piece of what we do. Okay, so that's like big picture in terms of Bird headquarters, what do we think about, and the scooter industry. But I want to just talk a little bit about Tel Aviv in particular. I said it earlier about 1 in 3 Tel Avivians using a Bird. And by the way, that's a picture of Yaniv, our general manager, who is sitting right there. If you have not met him, I hope you will all take a chance to meet him. If you have really tough, aggressive questions, feel free to ask him. He's your person. We have a great team here, so I hope you will get to know them. But it's been really incredible to see what shared scooters have, how they've taken off in Tel Aviv. I mentioned it before, I travel around the world. I mean, now that I'm pregnant, I'm doing a little less travel, but especially before, was meeting with governments everywhere. And Tel Aviv comes up as an example all the time, because it is a place where utilization is off the charts. I mean, I was walking just last night on Rothschild Boulevard, and I'm sure at this point you all know this, but it's just incredible as someone who does not live here. It is incredible to see how many people are on forms of micro-mobility. And it is just a real testament. I mean, there are some other cities in the world that are getting close, but no one is where Tel Aviv is in terms of people actually using this as a mode of transportation to get around. And so it's really incredible. And so when I've been in cities, whether it's Los Angeles or Chicago or Mexico City, a lot of times things will come up where people will want to know, well, what are examples of cities where this adoption has really taken off, where it's really getting people out of cars? This is not just a tourist attraction. It really is a way that people get around. And so I spend a lot of time talking about Tel Aviv as a market, and it's really quite incredible. And I'm out of time, so I'm gonna be very fast in terms of just the end here, which is just to say, we started putting together some stories from people in Tel Aviv in terms of what Bird has meant to them. I have to say the idea that 1 in 3 people in Tel Aviv has used a Bird is just incredible and really inspiring to us. And we've heard some amazing stories of, very partial to it, of a woman who apparently got rid of her bike when she was pregnant and then didn't go back to it, but instead started using Bird afterwards as a form of shared mobility to get around. I think one of the things that Tel Aviv is showing us is that this is a mode of transportation where shared use of scooters can really change the trajectory of cities, right? Like we started talking about at the very beginning of this presentation, Tel Aviv being one of the most congested cities in the Western world, and yet there is so much potential here when you look at how shared transportation has taken off. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.